The spring of 1878 brought more than wildflowers to the dusty streets of Promise Creek. Wyoming, it brought whispers that followed Olivia Turner like shadows, clinging to her skirts as she made her way through town. 3 years of marriage to the town's doctor had yielded no children, and in a place where a woman's worth was often measured by the fullness of her nursery, Olivia's empty cradle had become everyone's business. Olivia kept her chin high as she walked past Jennings' general store, pretending not to notice Mrs. Prescott and her circle of friends huddled near the entrance. Their voices, though lowered, carried on the wind. "Such a shame," Mrs. Prescott murmured, adjusting her bonnet. "Dr. Turner deserves a proper family. What good is a wife who can't give him children?" Olivia clutched her basket tighter, quickening her pace. These comments were nothing new. They'd begun as sympathetic glances, evolved to whispered concerns, and now had become outright judgment. Childlessness in Promise Creek was viewed as either punishment or pitiable circumstance, and the town had decided which category Olivia belonged in. The bell above Miller's dry goods jingled as Olivia stepped inside, grateful for the momentary reprieve from public scrutiny. "Morning, Mrs. Turner," Albert Miller called from behind the counter, his friendly demeanor a balm to her wounded spirit. "What can I help you with today?" "Just some fabric for a new dress," Olivia replied, running her fingers along a bolt of blue cotton, "and perhaps some thread to match." As Albert measured the fabric, the door swung open, bringing with it a rush of spring air and the imposing figure of Frederick Vance, a newcomer to Promise Creek, who'd arrived just 3 months prior. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of warm whiskey, he cut an impressive silhouette against the doorframe. Unlike most men in town who wore their hats pulled low, Frederick wore his pushed back, as if he had nothing to hide. His clothes were clean but worn, marking him as a working man, a cowboy who'd been hired on at the Hammond Ranch outside of town. "Mr. Vance," Albert nodded. "What brings you in today?" "Need some supplies," Frederick answered, his voice carrying the rough edges of a man who spent more time with cattle than people. "Riding out to check the northern fence line tomorrow." Olivia kept her eyes on the fabric before her, but she could feel Frederick's presence like heat from a stove. They'd exchanged pleasantries a handful of times since his arrival, but never more than that. "Mrs. Turner," he acknowledged with a tip of his hat. His eyes, when they met hers, held none of the pity or judgment she'd grown accustomed to. "Mr. Vance," she returned with a polite nod. Olivia paid for her purchases and turned to leave, but as she reached the door, Frederick spoke again. "Mrs. Turner, would you mind passing a message to the doctor? Tell him I'm much obliged for that salve he gave me, fixed my hands right up." Olivia glanced at Frederick's hands, strong and calloused, but free from the cracked, bleeding skin she'd noticed when he'd first visited her husband's practice. "I'll let him know," she promised. Outside, the spring sunshine did little to warm the chill that had settled in her chest. She'd been married to Matthew Turner for 3 years, and with each passing month, the absence of a child became more pronounced. Matthew was kind and patient, never once voicing disappointment, but Olivia saw it in his eyes, the longing when he delivered other women's babies, the wistfulness when patients brought their children to his office. By the time Olivia reached home, a modest 2-story house attached to Matthew's medical practice, her spirits had sunk lower than the heels of her boots in the muddy spring soil. She entered through the kitchen, setting her basket on the table before moving to check on the stew she'd left simmering. "Livy, is that you?" Matthew called from his office. "Yes, I'm back," she replied, smoothing her skirt and tucking a stray curl behind her ear. Matthew appeared in the doorway, medical journal in hand. At 32, he was considered one of the finest doctors in the territory, thoughtful and thorough, with steady hands and a keen mind. His dark hair was beginning to gray at the temples, but it only added to his distinguished appearance. "How was town?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "The same as always," she answered, avoiding his eyes. "Mr. Vance says thank you for the salve. It helped his hands." "Good, good," Matthew nodded, distracted by something in his journal. "I've been reading about a new treatment that might—" He stopped, seeing her expression. Livy, what's wrong? Olivia shook her head, turning back to the stove. Nothing, just tired is all. Matthew's sigh filled the kitchen. You heard them talking again, didn't you? It doesn't matter, she insisted, stirring the stew with more force than necessary. It does matter, Matthew said, setting his journal aside. What they say is true, Olivia interrupted, her voice cracking. 3 years, Matthew, 3 years and not so much as a late month. What kind of wife am I if I can't give you children? Matthew crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her face in his hands. You're the kind of wife who makes me happier than I ever thought possible, children or no children. Olivia wanted to believe him, but the hollow ache in her chest, the emptiness that should have been filled with life, told a different story. That night, as she lay beside her sleeping husband, Olivia stared at the ceiling, wondering if the whispers would ever stop, if the emptiness would ever feel less like failure. 3 days later, Olivia was in the garden behind their home when she heard the commotion, horses galloping down the street, men shouting. She dropped her trowel and hurried around to the front of the house, where a crowd had already gathered outside Matthew's office. What happened? She asked Mrs. Holloway, who stood nearest. Accident at the Hammond Ranch, the older woman replied. Fence collapsed on some of the hands. Olivia pushed through the crowd, her heart racing. Matthew's office was already full. 3 men laid out on examination tables and cots, blood seeping through hastily applied bandages. Livy, I need your help, Matthew called when he saw her, his sleeves rolled up, hands already bloodied. Boil water and prepare the instruments. We've got broken bones to set and wounds to clean. Olivia moved with practiced efficiency, having assisted Matthew many times before. She sterilized instruments, prepared bandages, and held limbs steady as Matthew worked, moving from one patient to the next. It wasn't until she was wiping blood from a man's face that she recognized Frederick Vance beneath the dirt and crimson. A deep gash ran across his forehead, and his left arm hung at an unnatural angle. Mr. Vance, she gasped. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her face. Despite his obvious pain, a faint smile touched his lips. Mrs. Turner, seems I've made quite a mess of myself. Lie still, she instructed, pressing a clean cloth to his forehead. My husband will see to you soon. No rush, Frederick mumbled, his voice strained. Others need him more. Olivia glanced at the other injured men, one with a crushed leg, another with splinters embedded in his side. Frederick was right, they needed immediate attention. I can clean and stitch your head wound, she told him. I've done it before. Frederick's eyes, glazed with pain, searched her face. I trust you, he said simply. Those 3 words settled something inside Olivia, a confidence that had been eroded by months of doubt. She gathered the necessary supplies and began cleaning the wound, her hands steady and sure. This will hurt, she warned as she prepared the needle. Frederick's jaw tightened. I reckon I've had worse. As Olivia worked, she spoke softly, telling him about the wildflowers she'd planted in her garden, describing the colors that would soon bloom. It was a distraction for him from the pain, for her from the gravity of the situation. There, she said finally, cutting the last suture. That should heal well if you keep it clean. Thank you, Frederick whispered, his eyes already closing with exhaustion. Matthew appeared at her side, his face drawn with fatigue. Well done, Livy, I'll set his arm now. Together, they worked through the night, tending to the injured men. By morning, all 3 were stable, though the man with the crushed leg would likely walk with a limp for the rest of his life. As dawn broke, Matthew insisted that Frederick, whose injuries were less severe than the others, stay with them rather than make the journey back to the ranch. The bunkhouse is no place for a man with a concussion, he declared, overriding Frederick's protests. And so Frederick Vance took up temporary residence in their spare room, bringing with him a quiet fortitude that somehow filled the emptiness of the house. In the days that followed, Olivia found herself drawn to their unexpected guest. Unlike most men she knew, Frederick was a good listener, genuinely interested in her thoughts. He sat at their kitchen table each evening, his injured arm in a sling, and asked about her day, about the books she read, about the vegetables growing in her garden. My ma kept a garden, he told her one evening as she changed his bandages. Said there was no problem on Earth that couldn't be solved with dirt under your fingernails and the sun on your back. She sounds wise, Olivia smiled. She was, Frederick nodded, a shadow passing over his face. Lost her to influenza when I was 15. I'm sorry, Olivia said, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder. Frederick shrugged his good shoulder. It's the way of things out here. Life's hard and then it's over. That's rather bleak, Olivia frowned. Maybe, he conceded. But there's beauty in it too. The way people endure, the way they find joy despite everything. As Frederick's strength returned, he began helping around the house, chopping wood one-handed, fixing the loose porch step that had been bothering Olivia for months, even repairing the leaking roof over the kitchen. You don't have to do all this, Olivia told him as he carefully nailed down a new shingle. I don't like owing debts, he replied, not looking up from his work. You and the doctor saved my hide. Least I can do is make myself useful. Matthew, busy with his practice, seemed grateful for Frederick's presence. Good to have another man around the house, he commented one evening, and Livy seems happier with you here. Frederick's ears reddened at this, and he mumbled something about just pulling his weight. A week turned into 2, and though Frederick's arm was healing well, neither Matthew nor Olivia suggested he return to the ranch. The arrangement suited them all. Matthew had help with the heavier tasks around the property. Olivia had company during the long days, and Frederick had a comfortable bed and home-cooked meals. It was during the 3rd week that Olivia noticed the whispers in town had changed direction. Now they followed her and Frederick, speculation darkening with each passing day. They're saying things, she confessed to Matthew one night, about me and Mr. Vance. Matthew, reviewing his patient notes at the desk in their bedroom, looked up sharply. What things? Olivia twisted her hands in her lap. That it's improper for him to stay with us, that there might be impropriety. Matthew set down his pen, his expression troubled. Do you want him to leave? The question caught Olivia off guard. Did she want Frederick to leave? The thought of the house without his steady presence made her chest tighten in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. No, she admitted. But I don't want people thinking ill of you because of me. Matthew crossed to the bed, sitting beside her. Livy, I've never much cared what people think, but I care about you. If his presence here is causing you distress, it's not him, she interrupted. It's them. Their constant judgment. First I'm lacking because I can't bear children, and now I'm somehow improper for helping a man who was injured. Matthew took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. People will always talk. It's the nature of small towns, but we know the truth. The truth. Olivia wasn't entirely sure what the truth was anymore. She knew she enjoyed Frederick's company, his quiet strength, the way he saw her not as a failure of a woman, but as a person with thoughts and dreams of her own. But she also loved Matthew, had built a life with him, even if that life wasn't what either of them had imagined. The next morning, Olivia was kneading bread dough when Frederick appeared in the kitchen doorway, hat in hand. I think it's time I returned to the ranch, he announced without preamble, Olivia's hands stilled in the dough. Your arm is healing fine, he finished for her. And I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. You haven't imposed, she said, wiping flour from her hands. We've enjoyed having you. Frederick's gaze dropped to the floor. People are talking, Mrs. Turner. I won't have your reputation suffering on my account. So he'd heard the whispers, too. Olivia felt heat rising in her cheeks, mortification and anger warring within her. Since when does Frederick Vance care what people say? His head snapped up, eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Since it affects someone he stopped, swallowing hard. Someone I respect. The word hung between them, a poor substitute for whatever he'd been about to say. Olivia knew she should let it pass, should agree that his departure was for the best. Instead, she heard herself ask, is that all I am to you? Someone you respect. Frederick's knuckles whitened around the brim of his hat. Mrs. Turner, Olivia, you know it wouldn't be proper for me to say more. Proper, she echoed, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. Everything in this town is about what's proper, who isn't. It's not just about propriety, Frederick said quietly. It's about what's right. You're married to a good man, a man who saved my life. I know that, Olivia whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. I know that better than anyone. Frederick took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. I'll be gone by noon. Please thank the doctor for me. Olivia watched him walk away, the weight in her chest heavier than it had ever been. She turned back to her bread dough, pounding it with renewed vigor, as if she could knead away the confusion in her heart. By the time Matthew returned for lunch, Frederick was gone, leaving behind only a neatly made bed and a letter thanking them for their kindness. Olivia placed a simple meal on the table, her movements mechanical. "You're quiet," Matthew observed, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. "Mr. Vance left," she said, not looking up from her plate. "I noticed. Did something happen?" Olivia shook her head. "He felt it was time." "His arm is nearly healed." Matthew studied her face, seeing more than she wanted him to. "You miss him already." It wasn't a question, and Olivia couldn't bring herself to deny it. "He was good company during the day, that's all." "Is it?" Matthew asked softly. Olivia's head snapped up, meeting her husband's gaze. Instead of anger or accusation, she found only sadness in his eyes. "Matthew, I would never—" "I know," he interrupted. "You're too good for that, but I've seen how you look at him, how he looks at you." Shame flooded Olivia's cheeks. "Nothing happened. Nothing would have happened." "I believe you," Matthew said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "but feelings don't need actions to be real." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "I love you, you have to know that." "I do know that," Matthew assured her. "But I also know that in the 3 years we've been married, I've never seen you as alive as you've been these past weeks." Olivia pulled her hand away, standing abruptly. "I don't want to discuss this anymore." Matthew let her go, watching as she fled to the garden where she spent the remainder of the afternoon viciously pulling weeds, as if she could uproot her feelings as easily. 2 weeks passed, and though life returned to its regular rhythms, Olivia felt Frederick's absence like a phantom limb constantly aware of the space where he should be. She threw herself into her duties with renewed determination, assisting Matthew in his practice, keeping their home immaculate, volunteering at the church. Spring blossomed fully into summer, bringing with it scorching heat and the annual Promise Creek Founders' Day celebration. The town square was transformed with bunting and banners, tables laden with food, and a makeshift dance floor constructed in front of the gazebo. Olivia wore her new blue dress, the one made from the fabric she'd purchased the day Frederick first spoke to her in Miller's Dry Goods. Matthew complimented her appearance as they walked arm in arm toward the festivities, but his eyes held a resignation that made her heart ache. The celebration was in full swing when they arrived, children running between tables, women comparing pie recipes, men gathered in clusters discussing cattle prices and weather predictions. Olivia braced herself for the inevitable whispers, plastering on a smile as they made their rounds. It was Mrs. Prescott who struck the first blow, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes sharp as flint. "Olivia, dear, you're looking well. We were all so concerned when that cowboy was staying at your home. Such a difficult situation." "Mr. Vance was injured," Olivia replied evenly. "My husband was caring for him." Of course," Mrs. Prescott nodded, her gaze flicking to the women beside her. "Though some might say a doctor's home isn't the proper place for a ranch hand, especially with a young wife present." Olivia felt Matthew's hand tighten on her arm, a silent warning not to engage. But 3 years of whispers, of judgment, of being found wanting had built a reservoir of anger she could no longer contain. "And what exactly are you implying, Mrs. Prescott?" Olivia asked, her voice carrying enough to draw the attention of nearby revelers. The older woman blinked, unused to being challenged. "I'm not implying anything, dear, just concerned for your reputation." "My reputation," Olivia repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You mean the one you and your friends have been attempting to destroy since the day I arrived in this town. First because I couldn't give my husband children, and now because we showed Christian charity to an injured man." A hush fell over the nearest tables, people turning to watch the confrontation. "Livy," Matthew murmured, but she was beyond hearing. "For 3 years I've endured your whispers, your pitying looks, your thinly veiled insults," Olivia continued, her voice trembling with emotion. I've smiled and nodded and pretended it didn't hurt when you suggested I was somehow less of a woman because my arms remain empty. Mrs. Prescott's face had gone pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I never said, "You didn't have to say it," Olivia cut her off. It was in every sympathetic head tilt, every question about when we might be blessed, every time you fell silent when I approached. The crowd had grown now, forming a circle around them. From the corner of her eye, Olivia saw Frederick at the edge of the gathering, his tall frame unmistakable, his expression unreadable. "I think you're being overly sensitive," Mrs. Prescott sniffed, rallying her dignity. "After all, it's only natural for a woman to want children. And for a man to want heirs." "Natural, yes," Olivia agreed, "but not always possible, and not the only measure of a woman's worth." "Well, of course not," but Mrs. Prescott began, only to be interrupted by another voice from the crowd. "She's right." All eyes turned to Frederick Vance as he stepped into the circle, hat in hand. "Mrs. Turner is right. A woman's worth isn't measured by the children she bears, but by the life she lives, the kindness she shows, the strength she carries." Mrs. Prescott's eyes narrowed. "I don't think this is any of your concern, Mr. Vance." "Maybe not," Frederick conceded, "but I've seen more decency and compassion in Mrs. Turner's little finger than in this entire town combined. She and the doctor took me in when I was hurt, cared for me like family. And all you can do is whisper behind your hands about impropriety." Olivia stood frozen, unable to believe that Frederick was defending her so publicly. "They laughed," Frederick continued, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "I heard them, laughing about how she couldn't bear a child. As if that was something to mock, as if that defined her." His eyes found Olivia's, holding them with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But you already carry enough, Mrs. Turner. You carry the weight of this town's expectations, your husband's practice, every patient who comes through your door. You carry it all with grace and dignity that these people can't even comprehend." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant laughter of children playing at the far end of the square. Olivia felt tears streaming down her face but made no move to wipe them away. Mrs. Prescott was the first to recover, drawing herself up with affronted dignity. "Well, I never. Come along, ladies, we don't have to listen to this." She stalked away, her circle following, but the damage was done. The whispers would change direction now, focusing on Frederick's impassioned defense on what it might mean. Matthew's hand on Olivia's arm was gentle but insistent as he led her away from the crowd, toward the relative privacy of the gazebo. Frederick hesitated, then turned to go. "Mr. Vance," Matthew called after him. "A word, if you please." The three of them stood in the shadow of the gazebo, the sounds of the celebration muted by distance. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs, certain that confrontation was imminent. "You care for my wife," Matthew said without preamble. Frederick didn't flinch from the direct statement. "I do. More than is proper, more than is right. I never meant for it to happen." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected such honesty. Matthew nodded slowly. "And you, Livy, do you care for him?" She couldn't lie, not now. "Yes." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Matthew closed his eyes briefly, his shoulders sagging as if under an invisible weight. "3 years ago, I promised to love you in sickness and in health, for better or worse," he said quietly. "I meant those vows. But I never meant to trap you in a life that brought you more sorrow than joy." "Matthew, no," Olivia protested, reaching for his hand. "You haven't trapped me, I chose you." "You did," he agreed, "but people change, circumstances change. The woman who chose me 3 years ago had different dreams, different expectations." Frederick shifted uncomfortably. "Doctor, I should go. This is between you and your wife." "No," Matthew said firmly. "This concerns you too, Mr. Vance. Because I believe my wife loves us both in different ways." The bluntness of his statement left both Olivia and Frederick speechless. "I've seen it happening," Matthew continued, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "Since you came to stay with us. The way she lights up when you enter a room, the way you look at her like she's water in the desert." "I never acted on it," Frederick insisted. "I wouldn't dishonor either of you that way." "I know," Matthew nodded. And that's why I'm going to say something that might sound mad. He took a deep breath. I'm leaving Promise Creek. What? Olivia gasped. Matthew, no, let me finish, he said gently. I received a letter last week from an old colleague in Philadelphia. The hospital there needs doctors with experience in rural medicine. They're establishing a program to train physicians for frontier towns. You never mentioned this, Olivia said, hurt coloring her voice. Because I wasn't considering it, Matthew replied. Not until I saw you today standing up to Mrs. Prescott. You were magnificent, Livy. Fierce and proud and everything I've always admired about you. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't ask you to keep living in a town that has never truly accepted you, in a marriage that hasn't given you what you hoped for. So you're just going to leave? Frederick asked, incredulity evident in his tone. Walk away from your wife. I'm giving her a choice, Matthew corrected. I'm going to Philadelphia. I've already accepted the position. The question is whether Olivia wants to come with me, start fresh in a city where no one knows us or cares if we have children, or, he paused, swallowing hard, or whether she wants to stay here with you. Olivia felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. You're asking me to choose between you. I'm asking you to choose the life that will bring you happiness, Matthew said. I love you enough to want that for you, even if it means letting you go. Tears streamed freely down Olivia's face now. How can I possibly make that choice? You don't have to decide right now, Matthew assured her. I don't leave for 2 weeks. Frederick, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. Doctor, this is your wife. You can't just— I'm not just anything, Matthew interrupted. I've thought about this for weeks. Since the day you left our home and I saw how it affected Olivia, I've prayed about it, and I believe this is the right path. And if she chooses to go with you, Frederick asked quietly. Then I'll be the happiest man in Philadelphia, Matthew said with a sad smile. And you'll have to find a way to let her go. With that, Matthew kissed Olivia's cheek and walked back toward the celebration, leaving her alone with Frederick and the impossible choice before her. For several moments, neither spoke, the weight of Matthew's ultimatum pressing down on them like a physical force. He's a better man than I am, Frederick finally said, his voice rough with emotion. I wouldn't have the strength to do what he just did. Olivia wiped at her tears with trembling hands. He's always been that way, putting others before himself. What will you do? Frederick asked, not quite meeting her eyes. I don't know, she admitted. How can I choose? He's my husband. We've built a life together. A life you're not happy in, Frederick pointed out gently. And what kind of life could I have with you? Olivia challenged, sudden anger flaring. The wife of a ranch hand. Living in some shack, still subjected to the town's gossip, only worse now because I'd be the woman who left her husband for another man. Frederick flinched as if she'd struck him. Is that all you think I am? A ranch hand with nothing to offer? No, Olivia sighed, the anger draining away as quickly as it had come. That's not what I meant. I don't know what any future looks like right now. Frederick was quiet for a moment, then spoke hesitantly. I haven't been entirely truthful about my circumstances. Olivia looked up, confusion replacing despair. What do you mean? I'm not just a ranch hand, he explained, or at least I wasn't always. Back in Colorado, my father owned one of the largest cattle operations in the territory. When he died last year, I inherited everything. Olivia stared at him, disbelief written across her face. You're a rancher, then why are you working as a hand at the Hammond place? Frederick shrugged, embarrassment coloring his features. I needed some time away after Pa died, wanted to work with my hands, clear my head. Figure out if I even wanted the responsibility of running a ranch that size. And do you? Olivia asked. Want that responsibility? I do, he nodded. In fact, I've been in talks with Hammond about buying his operation, expanding into Wyoming. Olivia's mind reeled with this new information. So you wouldn't be a ranch hand, you'd be a rancher, Frederick finished for her, with land means a future to offer. The implication hung in the air between them. He could give her a life, a good one, if she chose him. I need time to think, Olivia said finally, taking a step back. This is all too much, Frederick nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need, I'll be here. The 2 weeks that followed were the most agonizing of Olivia's life. During the day, she helped Matthew pack his medical books and instruments, each item a reminder of their shared life. At night, she lay awake beside him, tears silently soaking her pillow as she weighed her options. Matthew, true to his word, never pressured her for a decision. He spoke of Philadelphia with cautious optimism, describing the hospital, the opportunities for advancement, the busy city streets so different from Promise Creek's dusty roads. Frederick kept his distance, respecting her need for space, though she occasionally caught glimpses of him in town, his tall frame unmistakable even at a distance. The townspeople, chastened by the Founders' Day confrontation, treated her with newfound deference, though Olivia found she cared less and less what they thought. 3 days before Matthew was scheduled to leave, Olivia woke before dawn, a clarity in her mind that had been absent for weeks. She dressed quietly and made her way to the kitchen, where she began preparing a special breakfast pancakes with fresh berries, Matthew's favorite. When he appeared in the doorway, hair still mussed from sleep, Olivia smiled genuinely for the first time in days. "You're up early," he observed, the question evident in his voice. "I've made my decision," she said simply, setting a plate before him. Matthew sat down slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. And Olivia took the seat opposite him, reaching across the table to take his hand. "I'm staying in Promise Creek." A complex mix of emotions crossed Matthew's features: pain, resignation, and beneath it all, a flicker of something that might have been relief. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "No," Olivia admitted with a small laugh. "I'm not sure of anything except that I care for you both, but in different ways. What I feel for Frederick, it's new and uncertain and terrifying, but it's also powerful in a way I can't ignore." Matthew nodded, squeezing her hand. "I suspected as much. And in time, I think I'll be grateful that we faced this honestly before bitterness could take root." "Will you be all right?" Olivia asked, tears threatening again. "Eventually," Matthew smiled sadly. "Philadelphia will be a fresh start, and knowing you're happy will make it easier." They spent the next 3 days saying goodbye to their home, to their marriage, to the life they'd built together. Matthew arranged for the sale of their house, with half the proceeds going to Olivia to establish her new life. They spoke with Reverend Simmons, who was shocked by their decision but agreed to handle the necessary paperwork for their separation. The morning of Matthew's departure dawned clear and cool, a perfect late summer day. Olivia accompanied him to the stage depot, her heart heavy with the finality of what they were doing. "Write to me," Matthew said as the stage was loaded. "Let me know how you are." "I will," Olivia promised, tears streaming freely now, "and you'll do great things in Philadelphia, I know it." Matthew cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "Be happy, Livy, that's all I ask." With a final kiss to her forehead, he boarded the stage. Olivia watched until it disappeared around the bend, taking with it the man who had loved her enough to let her go. She stood alone at the depot for a long time, coming to terms with the enormity of her decision. When she finally turned to leave, she found Frederick waiting at a respectful distance, uncertainty written across his features. "I didn't want to intrude," he explained as she approached. "But I couldn't stay away, not today." Olivia looked up at him, this man who had upended her world in the span of a few short months. "Walk with me." They moved in silence through town, past the curious stares and whispered comments until they reached the edge of Promise Creek, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. "Matthew's gone," Olivia said finally, stating the obvious. "And you stayed," Frederick replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I stayed," she nodded. "But that doesn't mean I'm ready to rush into anything." Frederick's expression softened. "I wouldn't expect you to. You need time to grieve what you've lost, even if the decision was yours." Relief washed through Olivia at his understanding. "What happens now?" "Now," Frederick said thoughtfully, "we take it one day at a time. I'm closing the deal on the Hammond Ranch next week. There's a small house on the property, nothing fancy but solid. I'll be moving there." "And me?" Olivia asked. "That depends on what you want," Frederick replied. "I have rooms at the hotel until the sale is finalized. I can help you find a place in town if you prefer to be on your own for a while." Olivia considered this. The thought of remaining in Promise Creek, alone in some rented room, enduring the town's judgment, it held no appeal. "I don't want to stay in town," she said decisively. "But I'm not ready to live as a wife again. Not yet." Frederick nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The ranch has a foreman's cottage about a quarter-mile from the main house. It's small, but it would be yours. Your own space, your own life, but close enough that we could get to know each other properly." "I could have a garden," Olivia mused, warming to the idea. "The biggest garden in Wyoming, if you want," Frederick smiled. "And the ranch will need someone with medical knowledge. Those cowboys are always getting themselves hurt." The first genuine laugh in weeks bubbled up from Olivia's chest. "Are they all as reckless as you?" "Worse," Frederick grinned. "Much worse." As they stood on the edge of town, the vast expanse of Wyoming stretched before them, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in years' hope. Not the desperate hope that had sustained her through failed attempts at motherhood, but something steadier, more grounded. A hope built on choice, on possibility, on the chance to define herself beyond the narrow confines of what others expected. "One day at a time," she agreed, turning to face the open prairie and whatever future awaited them there. Autumn painted the Wyoming landscape in golds and reds as Olivia settled into life at the Vance ranch. The foreman's cottage, once a spare, utilitarian space, blossomed under her care. Curtains hung at windows that had been bare for years, wildflowers gathered from the prairie brightened the kitchen table, and the beginnings of what promised to be a magnificent garden took shape behind the small house. Frederick kept his word, giving her space to heal and find her footing in this new life. Their interactions were carefully respectful, shared meals occasionally, conversations about the ranch, moments of connection that grew deeper with each passing week. He never pushed, never assumed, allowing Olivia to set the pace of their evolving relationship. The whispers in Promise Creek continued, of course. When Olivia rode into town for supplies, she endured the stares and hushed comments with a newfound indifference. What once would have devastated her now barely registered. She had faced the town's judgment head-on and survived. Their opinions no longer defined her worth. Letters arrived from Philadelphia every few weeks, Matthew's elegant handwriting filling pages with descriptions of his new life. He had settled into the hospital routine, was respected for his experience, and had begun seeing a widow who volunteered in the children's ward. His words held no recrimination, only genuine wishes for Olivia's happiness and occasional medical advice for the ranch hands she now tended to. As winter approached, Olivia found herself spending more time at the main house, sharing evening meals with Frederick, sitting before the fire as he read aloud from novels she'd never heard of. There was a comfort in his presence that she hadn't expected, a sense of being truly seen and valued for exactly who she was. On the first heavy snowfall of the season, Frederick appeared at her cottage door, his hat dusted white, his cheeks ruddy from the cold. "I was worried about you," he explained, stamping snow from his boots. "Wanted to make sure you had enough firewood. The storm's setting in faster than expected." Olivia smiled at his concern. "I'm fine. Come in and warm up before you head back." Frederick hesitated only briefly before stepping inside, removing his hat and coat as Olivia put the kettle on for tea. They sat at her small table, steam rising from their cups, the howl of the wind outside making the cottage seem even cozier. "It's been almost 4 months," Frederick said suddenly, breaking a comfortable silence. Olivia looked up, meeting his gaze. Since you stayed," he clarified. "Since you chose Promise Creek, chose the possibility of us." Her heart quickened at the directness of his statement. "Yes, I suppose it has." Frederick's fingers drummed nervously on the table. "I've been patient, given you time and space, and I'd give you more if you needed it, but I find myself wondering if you've had any thoughts about what comes next." The question hung between them, laden with unspoken hope. Olivia considered her response carefully, wanting to be honest but unsure of her own heart. "I have thought about it," she admitted finally. "More than I probably should." Frederick's expression remained carefully neutral. "And?" Olivia took a deep breath. And I'm grateful for these months, for the chance to know you, the real you, not just the cowboy who stayed in my spare room. I'm grateful for the way you've respected my need for time. But, Frederick prompted, sensing there was more. But I'm still afraid, Olivia confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of failing again, of not being enough. Frederick reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. Enough for what? For you, she said simply. What if we build a life together and I still can't have children? What if 5 years from now you're looking at me with the same disappointment I used to see in Matthew's eyes? Is that what you think? Frederick asked, genuine surprise in his voice. That I want you for the children you might bear me, Olivia shrugged helplessly. Isn't that what men want? Heirs to carry on their name, their legacy? Frederick was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. When I was 15, after my mother died, my father remarried. His new wife was young, barely 20. She gave him 3 sons in 5 years. Olivia listened, uncertain where this story was leading. He was proud of those boys, Frederick continued, bragged about them to anyone who'd listen. But he never saw them, not really. They were possessions to him, extensions of his pride. Frederick's expression darkened with the memory. When the youngest was born, I heard him telling his friends that now his legacy was secure. As if children were investments, not people with their own dreams and desires. He looked up, meeting Olivia's gaze with intensity. I promised myself I'd never be that kind of father. If I have children someday, it will be because I want to raise them with a woman I love, not because I need them to validate my existence or carry on my name. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. And if that woman can't give you children? Then we'll build a different kind of legacy, Frederick said without hesitation. One measured in love and kindness and the lives we touch, not in the children we produce. A sob escaped Olivia's throat, years of pent-up shame and inadequacy breaking free at his words. Frederick moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. Olivia Turner, he said softly, you already carry enough, the weight of expectations, the burden of others' judgments. I don't want to add to that weight. I want to help you bear it until you're ready to set it down entirely. Olivia looked into his eyes, warm and honest and full of something she was finally ready to name. I think I might love you, she whispered. Frederick's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I know I love you. Have since the day you stitched up my head and told me about your wildflowers. Outside, the storm raged, snow piling against the windows, wind rattling the panes. But inside the small cottage, something new and fragile and beautiful was taking root, like the first green shoots of spring pushing through frozen ground. Frederick stayed that night, sleeping in the chair by the fire rather than risk the journey back to the main house in the blizzard. Olivia watched him from the doorway of her bedroom, his large frame awkwardly folded into the too small space, and felt a certainty she hadn't expected. This man, this kind, patient, passionate man, was offering her a life built on acceptance rather than expectation. By spring, they were married, a small ceremony in Reverend Simmons' study, with only a few ranch hands as witnesses. Olivia wore a simple cream dress with wildflowers in her hair, Frederick a new suit that made him look more like the wealthy rancher he was than the cowboy she'd first met. They moved into the main house together, transforming the imposing structure into a true home. Olivia's garden expanded exponentially, her medical skills put to good use, treating everything from snake bites to broken bones among the ranch hands. Frederick's business flourished under his careful management, the Vance Ranch quickly becoming one of the most respected operations in the territory. In town, the whispers eventually died down, replaced by reluctant acknowledgement of their success. Even Mrs. Prescott was forced to adopt a civil tone when Olivia and Frederick donated generously to the new school building. Letters continued to arrive from Philadelphia, bringing news of Matthew's engagement to the widow, his promotion to head of rural medicine training, his contentment in his new life. Olivia responded with honest accounts of her own happiness, her growing love for Frederick, the life they were building together. In their second year of marriage, A wagon arrived at the ranch carrying two small children, a boy of 6 and a girl of 4, their clothes ragged, their faces dirty but determined. They had traveled with their uncle, who explained that their parents, distant cousins of Frederick's, had died of fever back in Colorado. There was no one else to take them in. Frederick and Olivia exchanged a single glance before opening their home and their hearts to the children. James and Sarah Vance became theirs in every way that mattered, filling the ranch house with laughter and chaos and a love that expanded to embrace them all. On a warm summer evening 5 years after that fateful Founders' Day celebration, Olivia sat on the porch swing, watching Frederick teach James to rope a practice dummy in the yard. Sarah sat at her feet, weaving wildflowers into an elaborate crown, her dark curls shining in the fading light. "Mama," she said, looking up suddenly, "Miss Henderson at school said everyone has a story about how they got their name. What's mine?" Olivia smiled, running a gentle hand over the girl's hair. "Your parents named you Sarah after your grandmother. It means princess in Hebrew." Sarah considered this, clearly pleased. "And James? James means supplanter or one who follows," Olivia explained. "It's a strong name with a long history." The child nodded solemnly, then returned to her flowers. A moment later, she looked up again. "What about the baby?" "What will you name him?" Olivia's hand went to her slightly rounded belly, still small enough to be hidden by her loose dress. They hadn't told the children yet, wanting to be certain after 2 earlier losses. This pregnancy, now entering its 5th month, felt different, stronger, more resilient. "How did you know?" Olivia asked, surprised by the child's perception. Sarah shrugged, the gesture so reminiscent of Frederick that Olivia had to smile. "You hold your tummy a lot, and you were sick in the mornings, and Papa keeps looking at you like you're made of glass." From across the yard, Frederick caught Olivia's eye, raising an eyebrow in question. She nodded slightly, and he excused himself from James's lesson to join them on the porch. "What's this about?" he asked, settling beside Olivia on the swing. "Sarah knows about the baby," Olivia said simply. Frederick's eyes widened briefly before a smile spread across his face. "Well, I guess we can't keep secrets around here." "Is it true?" James called from the yard, abandoning his rope to race toward the porch. "Are we getting a baby?" Frederick lifted the boy onto his lap, his expression serious. "We hope so, but it's early days yet, and sometimes babies decide they're not ready to join families." "Like the other times?" Sarah asked quietly, revealing that she'd been more aware than they'd realized. Olivia nodded, tears pricking at her eyes. "Like the other times." "So we don't want to get too excited just yet. But we can hope," Frederick added, reaching for Olivia's hand. "We can always hope." The children nodded, solemn with the weight of this guarded optimism. Then James brightened. "If it's a boy, can we name him after me?" Frederick laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "I think one James is plenty for any family." "What will you name it?" Sarah persisted, returning to her original question. Olivia and Frederick exchanged a look loaded with private meaning. "If it's a boy," Olivia said softly, "we thought we might name him Matthew." Frederick nodded, his expression tender. "And if it's a girl, we were thinking of Hope." "Hope," Sarah repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "I like that." As the sun set over the vast Wyoming prairie, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Olivia looked at her family, the man who had seen her worth beyond her ability to bear children, the children who had found a home in their love, the tiny life growing inside her that might or might not join their circle, and felt the truth of Frederick's words from years ago. She carried enough love, enough strength, enough purpose to fill a dozen lifetimes. And she carried it gladly, her heart full to overflowing with the legacy they were building together, measured not in names or bloodlines, but in love given freely, in acceptance offered without condition, in the courage to choose happiness even when the path was uncertain. In the end, that was legacy enough.